Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Assignment Earth, which is episode 26 of season 2 of Star Trek The Original Series. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Original Series, one episode at a time. In this video I will cover the original series episode Assignment Earth. So Assignment Earth is the episode where the Enterprise back in the 20th century and they discover an alien who is trying to transport to Earth. They intercept him. He's actually claims to be a human who is living on another planet from aliens who sent back to save Earth from World War III. But Kirk doesn't know if he believes them, and so Kirk keeps interfering with him and doesn't know if he should stop him from doing what he's doing, and eventually they let him do what he does and he stops World War III. The end. So, where to begin with this episode? So, it's very obvious, and this is the first thing anyone who knows anything about this episode. This was a pilot episode, a backdoor pilot, as they call it, that Gene Roddenberry wrote because he wanted to do this show, and this is an idea he had for a show, and he couldn't get enough money to do a pilot, and so he repurposed the script and just chucked in Kirk and the Star Trek crew so he could make it a Star Trek episode. It's his sneaky way to do this pilot that didn't, of course, get picked up anyway because it's a stupid idea. And that's what this episode is. That is basically what this episode is. I mean, there's not much more to say about that than Roddenberry's kind of a sneaky jerk, and use this as an excuse to do to pitch his other show, because he was thinking at the time he wrote this episode, or the time they produced it, that the original series would be canceled, because it was looking extremely likely that the original series would in fact be canceled. Even though, like, comparative, I've heard that, like, the rating system they were doing to determine that Star Trek wasn't doing well is kind of faulty, and that, comparatively speaking, Star Trek actually was doing well, so it shouldn't have gotten canceled. But there was a huge letter writing campaign that was successful, and I remember reading about this, and I believe it was the Omega Glory. They had an announcement after that episode saying Star Trek has been renewed for another season, so please stop writing us letters. Back in the day, in the 60s, I remember even in the 80s and 90s, there was letter writing campaigns. Nowadays, it's a GoFundMe campaign or whatever. But whatever, it's people are too lazy to write letters now. It's online petitions. But anywho, so they knew that by the time this episode aired, they knew that Star Trek was coming back for a third season, but not when this episode was produced. So they were almost certain. Like, Roddenberry himself kind of spearheaded the campaign to get Star Trek back on the air, and then kind of just dropped out of the season 3 when it did come back. Although he was somewhat involved, but not nearly as involved as he used to be. And then that gave us season 3, the season that everyone calls the worst season of the original series, which I may disagree with that, but there are certainly a lot more bad episodes there. A lot of bad episodes that stick out in season 3, I will say that. So, this plot's nonsensical. I don't even know if I want to, I'll talk about it, but it's just all BS excuse so Roddenberry could do this stupid pilot. So, alright, let me open with the idea of Assignment Earth, which is the name of the show Roddenberry wanted to do itself. So, a group of aliens took some humans from Earth, raised them, gave them the superior technology, and whatnot, and send them back to Earth to, protect it. And in this particular pilot episode, which by the way, as I said, this was written originally as a pilot episode of that show. There was no Kirk or Spock or anyone. So just judging by the storyline here, if I were to remove the Star Trek crew from this episode, which isn't hard to do because they barely do anything, but if I were to remove them from this episode, the episode is, the pilot is Gary 7 goes to Earth. He meets the secretary he thinks was the agent assigned before him, and so gives her all this information that she shouldn't have, and then realizing that the agents before him were actually dead, and this is just a local secretary, has no idea about all this alien shit. So he starts to introduce her to this, and she goes a bit crazy, and she's like, but eventually becomes his ally. And then there's that cat he's carrying around with him, who's apparently a shapeshifter. Maybe it's one of the aliens, I don't know, but he can change into a hot chick and then back into a cat. And he goes to a missile silo to do some missile shit, and almost gets stopped by Kirk, then almost gets stopped by the secretary, and eventually they let him do his thing, and he does it, and the world is saved. Once again, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls, or thanks to Carrie 7. And he talks about, this, to be fair, this was the time of the height of the Cold War, when nuclear war was a real threat. They were doing training exercises at school, the duck and cover. So it was, a fearful time for the world, and so they're speculating that, this is why the aliens came now to stop the Earth for World War III from happening, and from the Earth to blowing up itself. So I'm assuming, had this crappy show been picked up, they wouldn't be World War III every week, that they would find other missions for Gary 7 to go on. I don't know. It's probably reminiscent of shows like Get Smart and Mission Impossible. I wouldn't really know because I don't watch those shows. I don't really like that kind of thing. Which may also be why I don't like this. But it was so it seemed like it was going to try to be like that, but with not aliens, with an Earth and human from another planet who's raised on another planet with alien technology. And I suppose that cat's probably an alien. But so they throw the exposition very fast, saying, well, suppose you have these aliens who want to safeguard Earth, but so the best way to do it would to take some humans and raise them on that planet and then send them back. Is that the best way to do it? I don't know. But anyway, I suppose if you think about it, that's like a work around the Prime Directive, but they're still violating it. They say, it's not us, the humans themselves are doing it. We just raised them and gave them all the superior technology and showed them how to do it, but whatever. But they're saving the world, so we're supposed to be okay with that. Hi, hold on. Say hello. You want to say hello? Okay. Anyway. So, that's that pilot. So, that is a dumb idea, and it makes total sense why the network didn't pick it up. I would not want to watch this show. If the show had existed, I would not watch it. Even if it's even if a lot of Star Trek fans watched it because it started here, or just because Gene Roddenberry was the one who did it, I can see why they wouldn't pick it up. It's just a spy thriller thing, but with aliens. And plus, this episode itself, even removing the Star Trek setting, is boring. The majority of the episode is they're sitting in a silo and there's countdown, and I feel like I had 5-10 minute stretches, and I actually did fall asleep, I think, when I was watching this, where there's just a missile silo with them making announcements about some countdown, and they're playing all the suspenseful music. That's one thing I really noticed, how they kept playing the suspenseful music when nothing was really happening. Like, they were drawing this out for like 10, 15 minutes, and it would show the missile launching and go dun 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 dun, and it was just like a missile going. They were trying their hardest to make this interesting, and it wasn't. It was boring as fuck. And so, had this been the pilot, and even if this was its own pilot without Star Trek, it would have been so boring. Like, no wonder they didn't even give Roddenberry the money to even make the pilot, let alone greenlight a pilot. Or greenlight a show based on the pilot. Like, yeah. So, let's talk about the Star Trek element to it now. It is so superfluous. It's obvious there that they chucked it in. I mean, as I said at the start, the script was there. They reworked the script to put in the Star Trek characters, and it's so obvious. It's such a lazy rewrite, too. Alright, first of all, let me address the elephant in the room. The episode opens with Kirk's captain's log saying, "We've traveled back in time to the 20th century to discover how humanity survived during this time period." No, you fucking didn't. You don't just casually travel back in time. I can't remember if I put this in when I did my video about the most reckless uses of time travel. If I hadn't, I should have. Like, this is one of the most reckless uses of time travel. Let's just go back in time for the fuck of it. Let's take an entire starship back in time to the 60s, even though last time we were in the 60s, we very nearly changed history and altered the timeline and got discovered, and we almost prevented someone from ever being born. But hey, let's just fucking go back there again, just for the fuck of it, just for shits and giggles. It is one of the dumbest things to ever happen in the original series. And plus, the way that he just casually, like, very quickly minces in the captain's log and then moves on. So when I first saw this episode, I think I was missing the first, 5 minutes of the episode, and so I had no idea, why the hell are they in this episode? If you missed the first 30 seconds of this episode, you have no clue why the fuck the crew is back in the 20th century. And I was always wondering, why are they in the 20th century in the first place? And then I found out it's just because the answer is for the fuck of it. To see if humanity survives. Granted, this is the first time that the world was threatened on a global scale like this with nuclear weapons. It does up the game from all of history, but I still think you're gonna go back in time to this Cold War era, just to see how humanity survived. There's a lot of other more pivotal, I would argue, moments in history that you wonder how humanity survived. And not even that, but I know this is before they created this lore, but there was a nuclear holocaust in the 22nd century, or the 21st century, so wouldn't that be more interesting to study the actual nuclear holocaust other than this one that could have happened but didn't? But anyway, I know they didn't come up with that until later. That was TNG, I think, that they made that one up. But still, yeah, looking back on it, it's just nonsensical. And out of universe, we know why they're in the 20th century, because Roddenberry wanted to do this pilot that's set in the 20th century. And so he had to do it on Star Trek, so he had to find some way to shoehorn he could have at least come up with a better excuse. But then that would require them actually focusing on Kirk and giving him a, storyline. And we can't have that because we need to pitch this pilot with this fuckhead named Gary Seven. And so he couldn't even be bothered to give him a legitimate excuse. And I'm sure someone in the writer's room was like, okay, so you want to do this pilot as a Star Trek episode, but takes place in the 20th century. How are we going to include the Kirk and his crew? And they'll say, oh well, they traveled back in time to the 20th century, and the other person would be like, okay, so why? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Let's just say they travel back in time to study history, I guess. I don't fucking know. Who cares? Let's just get on with this. I want to focus on Gary 7. It is some of the laziest writing in the entire Star Trek franchise. It is so dumb. Now, once Kirk and crew are there, they don't really do anything in this episode except stand around and watch what happens. And every once in a while, they'll interfere when they shouldn't. And Kirk even says several times, "Oh, I don't even know if I should interfere or let Gary 7 do what he does." And then at the end of the episode, he just lets Gary 7 do, and he saves the world. So they serve no fucking purpose whatsoever. They're just sitting around watching TV. Like Scotty, we see Scotty up on the transporter room, like watching TV. Oh, look, there's the missile. Oh, look, there's Gary 7. And then we see Kirk and Spock. They immediately get arrested and captured by the security guard, who just so happens, by the way, to wake up from Gary 7's hypnotizing bullshit right at the exact time Kirk and Spock beam down. And they arrest them, but they take them into the launch room, not a holding cell. They don't throw them in prison. They don't have the military come and throw them in the military prison. They take them into the launch room and just let them stand there without handcuffs or anything. Just some security guy is kind of sort of keeping an eye on them. And just let them stand there, and then just standing there while all the boring ass fucking 15-minute long T-minus launch and blah 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 sequences go there, and Kirk and Spock are just standing there watching. They're spectators. They serve no narrative function in this fucking episode whatsoever. I mean, the closest that you could argue is that when Kirk stops Gary 7 at the end and almost, destroys the entire Earth and tries to get Spock to, get the computer to override it, but he can't do it, and Gary 7's like, "You gotta trust me." And so he does. So why did he interfere in the first place? Like, why was he, so he shouldn't have. He should have just left everything the fuck alone. So the one time he's involved in the story is when he, does something that's pointless. Had he had done nothing, everything would have been fine. So, Gary 7 appears more in canon, or not in canon, once in canon, but a lot in beta canon. And don't, please, do not. I hate, this is such a dumb episode. It should be wiped from canon. It should be wiped from everyone's existence misery. This is when Roddenberry was greedy and tried to do his own pilot for a stupid show that would never get picked up. You don't need to include this as part of the Star Trek canon. Now, the time it was actually in canon was in the gem that is Picard Season 2, which, of course, is the worst season in the entire franchise. And that, beautiful season there, they decided to introduce this character who was, looked exactly like a main character from the 25th century, except it's her ancestor or whatever. It was, of course, played by the same actress, because in Star Trek, especially in Picard, all your ancestors look exactly like you. But, okay. And she's actually a Romulan, so what she's doing on Earth, well, she's sent by the same people that sent Gary 7 to protect Earth and to watch over them. She's looking after this particular astrophysicist. Picard Season 2 is its own whole ball of issues. As I said, it is the worst season in the entire Star Trek franchise. It is just nothing but garbage, and so it kind of makes sense that such a garbage season like that would be the one thing in canon to reference this, to bring Gary 7 and his people back. Don't fucking do it. And then a lot of beta canon. There's some novels about it. There's one that tried to justify the eugenics wars happening in the 90s. Just the public wasn't aware of it. And they had Gary 7 was the main character in that novel. It's been decades since I've read it, and I don't care to read it again because it was silly. This whole Gary 7 thing is as silly it's dumb, and it's not Star Trek. It's just another pilot that Roddenberry wanted to sneakily shove onto the screens, and so it should be forgotten and wiped from Star Trek history. Anyway, I want to go ahead and thank all my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. Has always very much appreciated, the lifeblood of my channel, as I say. So my Patreon supporters are Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Brian A., Alessandro Michelosio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal House. Thank you all so very, very much for your very kind and generous support. So we have a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Ricky, who says, Gene Roddenberry's secret pilot episode for the shit show that never came to be. Thank God. I mean, how slick was he to do this crap? I mean, in the Star Trek universe, this entire episode was focused on this dude who did not find this character or the premise interesting at all. All of the original characters are barely in this episode. I wish that this episode was erased from canon, and I could not believe that horrible second season of Picard actually made references about this and solidified it into canon. I was in shock when it was mentioned, and that the entire episode was boring, and like I said earlier, did not care at all. So my rating is a 1 out of 10. So there was another show that I'm thinking of that did all these backdoor pilots, and that was the 90s version of The Outer Limits. I believe in its final season they knew it was coming to an end, so they did three, I think, micro pilots. But I think in that show was more acceptable because that was an anthology show. It was a sci-fi anthology show too, so they didn't have to shoehorn any main cast members or original characters to shove it into the series because it's an anthology show. They could just do a one-off. Now, looking back on it, it was kind of obvious that they were trying to set up for more stories, but none of them got picked up either. I think there was 1 or 2 I thought that might actually made an interesting show, but never happened. But yeah, it was way more excusable than what happened here, in my opinion. So next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells. Assignment Earth. Why are the Enterprise crew so cavalier about traveling back in time? Someone should tell Gary 7 to use a less conspicuous code name. And by the way, carrying a black cat around everywhere is going to get you noticed, whether said black cat can turn into a hot-looking lady or not. I pick up strong Get Smart and 60s Batman vibes from this episode, but Jesus E. Maria, did they have to make this into a comedy? It is, as they said when I was a kid, and quote, funny as a fart in a spacesuit, end quote. I feel sorry for Terry Garr because Jean the perv insisted she wear a really short dress, and she keeps getting accosted by Kirk and Spock. I'm assuming the cat can get through the doors on the Enterprise, and Scotty can see Gary 7 on the gantry of the rocket, but doesn't transport him away or just stun him with a phaser. Honestly, I'm not even sure what Gary 7 is attempting to do, but hey man, the kids are hip, so let's all stick it to the establishment. Why is Gary 7 carrying a sonic screwdriver? 4 large star-shaped moles somewhere on reporter Lincoln's body out of 5. Wait, you must mean 4 out of 10. You must mean 4 out of 10, because you know I use a 10 scale. And there's no way you're giving this episode 4 out of 5 after the way you talked about it. So I would say 4 out of 10 is still generous, though. So yeah. So the cat. Yeah, that's actually something I noticed when Gary Seven showed up to the rocket area, the area where they were launching a military base where they were launching a nuclear rocket, and he was carrying a cat. And he was like, and the guy was like, "Oh, can I see your papers?" He's like, "Sure, it's right here. See, I'm this guy." And the security guard made no mention to, why the fuck are you carrying a cat around a military base? Jesus Christ. But anyway, I will say Scotty did try to beam Gary Seven from the gantry way on the rocket, but it failed. Like his super technology redirected him back to his office or whatever. But anyway, that's yeah. And Terry Garr, I was going to mention that because I actually heard that she hated her experience on this episode. Absolutely hated. She said she hates Star Trek. She hated working on Star Trek. Doesn't like Gene Roddenberry. But I could understand that from this shit episode, but I wouldn't blame, I wouldn't say Star Trek sucks just because she was on the worst episode, one of the worst episodes of the show. So, anyway, my rating for Assignment Earth out of 10 is a 1, and I gotta say it loud like that. It's a 1. The worst. There's nothing good about this episode. Nothing. The fact that even if the pilot happened to be interesting, I would still very much hold it against us the way that the main characters are shoehorned into the episode and have nothing to do with anything, and how the sneaky, kind of just shitty way that Roddenberry tried to get around the network and do a pilot anyway by sacrificing an episode of one of his good show. But the pilot itself isn't good. The pilot's bad, and it makes total sense. I would not watch the show, as I said. It makes total sense why the networks didn't pick it up. Seemed like it was just trying to do a Get Smart, or Mission Impossible, but a lot more cheesy and dumb, with aliens, or with a human from another world with alien technology. It's not a good idea, and goddamn, I do agree with Ricky that this episode should absolutely be wiped from canon. So that is it for my review of Assignment Earth. So that's it. We covered all of Season 2 now. Yay! So now I get to move on to Season 3. Now, I know a lot of people say that Season 3 is the worst season of Trek, but I don't know. I'll be the judge of that. At the very least, I don't think it's that much worse than Season 2. Even if I do say I prefer Season 2, which I'm not sure yet, I'll see how I feel after I rewatch it. I don't think, from memory, because I watched this somewhat recently, it wouldn't be that much worse than Season 2. Honestly, I think Season 2 had all those, let's do Earth for no fucking reason. Let's do 20th century Earth or sometime in Earth's history for no goddamn reason, and Season 3 didn't do that. And Season 3 had some good episodes too. Also had some really crappy episodes, but that's what's coming up. I will be now delving into Season 3. So coming up on my channel on Wednesday, I will cover episode 1 of Season 3, which is Spectre of the Gun, but I had already covered this, so this will be a revisited video over on Patreon for my Patreon supporters. Wednesday will be Spectre of the Gun Revisited, and Thursday I will look back on Season 3 of Picard, with my season review for Season 3 of Picard, and then Saturday back on my channel with the TOS review with Alan of Troyes. Another crappy episode. Not quite as bad as this one though, but yeah, that's so that is what's coming up next for Enchantment of Eternity. So be sure to check that out. Check out my channel, as I do many other Star Trek videos and videos on many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.